This is a tale of two Manaphys. The first is about Shiny Manaphy, and the second is about an event Manaphy I got in my original copy of Pokemon Diamond in 2007. Here are their stories. How many Pokemon do I need to complete my BDSP home decks? 7. First, I need the 4 Kanto trait evolutions. So, I did initially complete the national decks in my first playthrough of Shining Pearl when the games first released. Back then, I didn't have anyone to trade with, so I originally obtained the trade evolutions by sending them up from Pokemon Go or evolving them in Legends Arceus. However, I've since upgraded from my Switch Lite to an OLED, and I now have 2 Switches, so I can trade with myself. To do a local trade, go to the second floor of any Pokemon Center and speak with the nurse in the middle to open a union room. Once you're in the room, press Y to open a menu to select the trade option. No link cable required, unlike the old days. And now I can easily get Alakazam, Golem, Machamp, and Gengar. Next, I need Clefairy. You can find it in the Trophy Garden as one of the post-game daily Pokemon. Let's see who I have today in my original Shining Pearl save file. Well, that was lucky. Now, if you weren't as lucky, the Trophy Garden cycles through a new Pokemon daily in a predetermined order. Just speak with the owner, Mr. Backlot, each day to trigger the next Pokemon on the list. And now I can check Clefairy off my list. After Clefairy is Milotic. While evolving a Feebas seems pretty tricky at first, it's actually not too difficult to make dry Poffins, and there's some wiggle room if your Poffins aren't perfect. So I can feed my Feebas a few dry Poffins, and now he'll evolve into Milotic. If you want a more in-depth guide for evolving Feebas, check out my other video. And last, the ruler of time itself, Dialga. Let me just play through the entirety of Brilliant Diamond for the first time real fast. I'll need to defeat 7 gyms, clear out the galactic headquarters, and then climb to the summit of Mount Coronet. And after defeating Mars, Jupiter, and Cyrus, its spear pillar, Dialga can join the team. Now that I have all 7 of the missing Pokemon, I can deposit them in Home on my Switch. Then I'll open Home on my phone, go to Mystery Gifts, and it's finally time to meet Shiny Manaphy. For part 2 of this video, I'm going to talk a bit about my thoughts on mythical Pokemon and show some footage of me transferring my 2007 Toys R Us event Manaphy all the way from Pokemon Diamond to Pokemon Home. So, without further ado, mythical Pokemon have always been the most exclusive and unobtainable Pokemon in the video game series. I remember, especially growing up, when mythical Pokemon were only available from in-person distributions at Toys R Us, GameStops, or malls in the US. While I never attended any in-person distributions for the Game Boy or GBA games, I did go to my first one from Manaphy in Pokemon Diamond and Pearl in 2007. I remember feeling extremely self-conscious going into the Toys R Us because Pokemon was considered kind of weird at the time, and I was getting a bit older, but I wasn't yet old enough to enjoy something without caring about what other people thought. However, I had just moved to a new state, and that sense of anonymity gave me the confidence to go to the distribution. This Toys R Us Manaphy is still locked in my original Diamond cartridge. I've never moved it up, mainly because I thought it was gone. You see, when I was a kid, my wonderful puppy at the time managed to grab a hold of my DS one night and chew the cartridge up so much that I assumed everything on it was gone. I couldn't get my DS to read it at the time, so I bought another copy of Diamond and moved on. However, over a decade later, when the Diamond and Pearl remakes were announced, I decided to replay the originals. I found my old copies of Diamond, and on a whim decided to test out the copy my dog had chewed up. To my surprise, it worked. I still never got around to transferring up the event Manaphy, but now, in honor of my dog's passing, I want to send the event Manaphy up to Scarlet and Violet, or Legends Arceus, to meet my new shiny Manaphy from home. Here is that journey. Luckily, I have all the hardware for this. I actually really love how quirky and not at all streamlined this process is, but I wish it didn't require software that is no longer available to download, like Pokemon Bank and Pokétransporter. I think my favorite step in this whole process is using the PAL Park to transfer Pokemon from the GBA games to Diamond, Pearl, or Platinum. I know I'm not showcasing it in this video, but I appreciate how it's reminiscent of the Safari Zone, but with your own Pokemon, and how everything catches with the first ball you throw. My least favorite step is probably the most challenging one I have to do today. The Pokétransfer minigame in Generation 5. I'm absolutely atrocious at aiming the crossbow. I had to attempt it twice for this video, so this part ends up being a bit more frustrating than it needs to be for me. That said, I do still appreciate how unique it is, and it is cool how the professor who runs the Pokétransfer lab is named Professor Park, a callback to the original PAL Park. Getting the Pokemon from the DS to the 3DS, and then the Switch, is arguably the easiest step, as long as you have all the necessary equipment. But, in my opinion, it's also the most sterile and least colorful. I'm curious what method we'll see with the Switch 2. Will it be as easy as depositing Pokemon into Home, since Home does seem pretty evergreen? Or will they make a whole new process? Anyways, out of the 5 mainline Switch games, Manaphy can only be transferred to 3. I decided to have these two cuties meet for the first time in the past, in Hisui. I love the watercolor-inspired designs and the sepia tones of Legends Arceus, and it feels poetic for these two Manaphys to meet in the past as one travels to the present. If you've watched to this point, thank you for following along on this journey. Let me know if you also went to Toys R Us or any other event for Manaphy back in the day. And best of luck if you're working on your BDSP home decks. The shiny is 100% worth it.